Good afternoon. This is Knowledge Time. Welcome, alchemists. Today I'll be reading from the book, The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. Currently, I am in chapter 14, Resist the Downward Pull of the Group, The Law of Conformity. Part 4, Group Dynamics. Since the beginning of recorded history, we can observe certain patterns that human groups fall into almost automatically, as if they were subject to particular mathematical or physical laws. The following are the most common dynamics that you must study in the groups that you belong to or pass through. Group culture. When we travel to another country, we are aware of the differences in culture from our own. Not only do the inhabitants have their own language, but they also have customs, ways of looking at the world and thinking that are different from our own. This is more pronounced among nations which have long traditions, but to a subtler extent, we can see the same thing happening with a company or office. It is all part of the social force blending and knitting the group together based on the particular chemistry of its members. When looking at your own group and its culture, think in terms of style and the overall mood that prevails. Is it loosely structured with an easygoing style, or is it organized top down, its members afraid of stepping out of line or breaking discipline? Do its members feel superior and separate from the rest of the world, displaying an elitist attitude? Or does the group pride itself on its populism? Does it see itself as cutting edge or more traditionalist? Does information flow easily throughout the group, giving it an open feel? Or does the leadership control and monopolize this flow? Does it have a masculine feel to it, a hyper competitive edge, and a more rigid chain of command? Or does it have a more fluid, feminine spirit that emphasizes cooperation over hierarchy? Does it seem riddled with dysfunction and disunity? Its members more concerned with their egos than with getting actual results? Or does it emphasize productivity and the quality of the work? To answer these questions, don't pay much attention to what the group says about itself, but rather examine its actions and the emotional tone that prevails within. Its style can have degrees of, of the above qualities or combinations of them, but the group will always have some type of identifiable culture and spirit. Two things to keep in mind. First, the culture will often center on an idea that the group images for itself: liberal, modern, progressive, ruthlessly competitive, tasteful, etc. The group may not live up to this idea, but to the degree that it tries to. The idea the idea operates as a myth that binds the group's members. Second, this culture will often reflect the founders of the group, particularly if they have a strong personality. With their own rigid or loose style, they have put their stamp on the group, even if in numbers in the thousands. But leaders who enter a group or company that has its set culture will often find themselves completely absorbed by this culture, even though they might think of altering it. The U.S. Department of Defense, housed in the Pentagon, emerged from World War II with a strong, hawkish spirit. Both presidents, Kennedy and Johnson, had their own views on the Pentagon and altering its culture. They both wanted to avoid entangling the U.S. in the Vietnam War. But this aggressive culture ended up altering their ideas and dragging them into the war. Many film directors in Hollywood have thought of doing things their own way, only to find themselves swallowed up by an entrenched culture that emphasizes top-down control and micromanagement of by producers. With their intermittent Minable notes. This culture has existed for close to 90 years, and no individual has been able to alter it. Better to be aware and realize that the larger the group and the more established the culture over time, the more likely it will control you than the other way around. One thing to keep in mind, no matter the type of culture or how disruptive it might have been in its origins, the longer a group exists and the larger it grows, the more conservative it will become. This is an inevitable result of the desire to hold on to what people have made or built and to rely on tried and true ways to maintain the status quo. This creeping conservatism will often be the death of the group because it slowly loses the ability to adapt. Group rules and codes. For any human group, disorder and anarchy are too distressing, and to standards of conduct and rules for how to do things quickly evolve and become set. These rules and codes are never written down, but are implicit. Violate them in some way, and you risk becoming a non-entity or even being fired without necessarily knowing the cause. In this way, the group imposes its own order without the need for active policing. The codes will regulate acceptable appearances, how much free talk is encouraged in meetings, the quality of obedience in relation to bosses, the expected work ethic, etc. When you are new to a group, you must pay extra attention to these tactic codes. Look at who's rising and who's falling within the group. Signs of the standards that govern success and failure. Does success stem more from results or from political smooching? Look at how hard people work when not being observed by bosses. You could work too hard or do a job too well and find yourself fired for making others look bad. There are inevitable sacred cows within the group, people or beliefs never to be criticized. Consider all of these as tripwires you must avoid at all costs. Sometimes a particular member of higher standing serves as the de facto policeman or policewoman for these rules and codes. Identify such individuals and avoid any friction with them. It's not worth it. The group court. Observe any community of chimpanzees at the zoo, and you will notice the existence of an alpha male and other chimpanzees adapting their behavior to him, fawning, imitating, and struggling to forge closer ties. This is the pre-human version of the court. We humans created a more elaborate version in aristocratic courts, dating from the earliest civilizations. In the aristocratic court, the subordinate members depended on the king or queen's favor to survive and thrive. The object of the game was to get closer to the man or woman on top without alienating the other courtiers, or to gang up and dispose the leader. Always a risky venture. Today, the court will form around the film executive, the head of an academic department, the CEO of a business venture, the political boss, the owner of an art gallery, a critic or artist who has cultural power. In a large group, there will be subcourts formed around subleaders. The more powerful the leader, the more intense is the gamemanship. The courtiers must look different now, but their behavior and strategies are pretty much the same. You must take note of a few of these behavioral patterns. First, courtiers have to gain the attention of leaders and ingratiate themselves in some way. The most immediate way to do this is through flattery. Since leaders inevitably have large egos and a hunger to have their high self-opinion validated, Flattery can do wonders, but it comes with risks. If it is too obvious, the flattener looks desperate, and it is easy to see through the strategy. The best courtiers know how to tailor their flattery to the particular insecurities of the leader and to make it less direct. They focus on flattering qualities in the leader that no one else has bothered to pay attention to but that need extra validation. If everyone praised the leader's business acumen but not his or her cultural refinement, you will want to aim at the latter. Mirroring the leader's ideas and values without using their exact words can be a highly effective form of indirect flattery. Keep in mind that forms of acceptable flattery will differ in each court. In Hollywood, it must be more effusive than in academia or in Washington, D.C. Adapt your flattery to the group spirit and make it as indirect as possible. Of course, it is always wise to impress bosses with your efficiency and to make them dependent on your usefulness. But be careful of taking this too far. If they feel you are too good at what you do, they may come to fear their dependence on you and wonder about your ambition. Make them feel comfortable in the superiority they believe they possess. Second, you must pay great attention to the other courtiers. Standing out too much, being seen as too brilliant or charming, will stir up envy, and you will die by 1,000 bites. You want as many courtiers on your side as possible. Learn to downplay your successes, to listen, or seem to listen deeply to the ideas of others, strategically giving them credit and praise in meetings, paying attention to their insecurities. If you must take action against particular courtiers, make it as indirect as possible. Working too slowly, isolate them in the group, never appearing too aggressive. Courts are always supposed to seem civilized. Be aware that the best courtiers are consummate actors and that their smiles and professions of loyalty mean very little. In the court, it does not pay to be naive without being paranoid. Try to question people's motives. Third, you need to be aware of the types of courtiers you will find in most courts and the particular dangers they can pose. One aggressive but clever courtier with little conscience can quickly dominate the group. For more on the type of courtiers, see the next section. Keep in mind that there is no way to opt out of the court dynamic. Trying to act superior to the political games or the need to flatter will only make you look suspicious to others. Nobody likes the holier than thou attitude. All you'll get for your honesty is to be marginalized. Better to be the consummate courtier and find pleasure in the game of court strategy. That's kind of like getting a job. If you really think about it. The group enemy. As mentioned above, our ancestors had a reflective fear at the sight of any outsiders to the group. This fear easily slid into hatred. The basis for this fear may well have been real, but the existence of rival tribes also had a positive side effect. It united and tightened the group. It also fit in well with the way the human brain processes information through binary parts of opposites, light and dark, good and evil, us versus them. Today, in our modern, sophisticated world, you will notice this very ancient dynamic continually at play. Any group will reflectively focus on some hated enemy, real or imagined, to help bring the tribe together, as Antoine Chekhov once noticed. Love and friendship, respect, do not unite people as much as a common hatred for something. Since the immemorial, leaders have exploited the enemy reflex for power, using the existence of the rival or enemy to justify almost anything and to distract from their own shortcomings. The enemy will be described as immoral, irrational, untrustworthy, or aggressive. The implication being that our group is the opposite. No side ever likes to admit it is not pure in its ethics or has aggressive intentions or is governed by emotion. It is always the other side. In the end, the need to feel a part of the tribe and against the other side is more important than the actual differences, which tend to be greatly exaggerated. Look at the group you belong to. You will inevitably see some sort of enemy or boogeyman to push against. What you require is the ability to detach yourself from this dynamic and to see the enemy as it is, minus the distortions. You will not want to overly display your skepticism. You might be seen as disloyal. Instead, keep your mind open so that you can resist the downward pull and overreactions that come from such tribal emotions. Take this even a step further by learning from the enemy, adapting some of its superior strategies. Group factions. Over enough time, individuals in a group will begin to split off into factions. The reason for this dynamic is simple. In a group, we get a narcissistic boost from being around those who share our values. But in a group over a certain size, this becomes too abstract. The differences among the members become noticeable. Our power to influence the group as individuals is reduced. We want something more immediate. And so we form subgroups and cliques with those who seem even more like us, giving us back that narcissistic boost. In this subgrouping, we now have power to divvy up, which increases its members' sense of self-importance. Eventually, the faction will experience its own splits from within, on and on. This splitting occurs unconsciously, almost as if it were responding to mechanical laws of group fission. If a faction gets strong enough, its members will start to give precedence to its interests over that of the greater group. Some leaders try to exploit this dynamic by playing one faction off the other in the form of divide and conquer. The more the factions fight, the weaker they become, and the greater the power in the hands of the man or woman on top. Miao Zedong was a master at this game. But it is a dangerous one because too much time tends to be wasted dealing with petty internal squabbles, and it can be hard to keep them all down. If left alone, factions can become so powerful they take over and dispose or control the leaders themselves. Better to tighten the whole group by creating a positive culture that excites and unifies its members, making factions less attractive. For more on this, see the last section of this chapter. One faction to pay particular attention to is the one that is formed by those in the higher echelons, which we can identify as the elites in the group. Although elites themselves sometimes split into rival factions, more often than not, when push comes to shove, they will unite and work to preserve their elite status. The clan tends to look after its own, all the more so among the powerful. They will inevitably manage to bend the group rules to ensure they tilt in their favor. In these democratic times, they will try to cover this up by posturing that what they are doing is for the greater good of the group. If the elites prosper, so will everyone else, they say. But you will never actually see the elite faction doing things that will lessen their power or making true sacrifices. Somehow, it is always those not among the elites who must make the sacrifices. Try not to fall for their rationalizations or cover stories, and to see this faction for what it is. Your task as a student of human nature is twofold. First, you must become a consummate observer of yourself as you interact with groups of any size, being with the assumption that you are not nearly as much of an individual as you imagine. To a great extent, your thoughts and belief system are heavily influenced by the people who raised you, your colleagues at work, your friends, and the culture at large. Be ruthlessly frank with yourself. Look at how your ideas and beliefs alter the longer you stay at a job or within a particular group. You are under subtle pressures to get along and to fit in, and you will respond to this without being aware. To see this clearly, think of how many times you have promoted an idea that is contrary to what the group wants on some fundamental issue and held on to this idea for a long period. It will probably be quite rare. Look at the bad decisions the group has taken and how often you went along with them. If this conformity becomes too ingrained in you, you will lose the ability to reason on your own, your most prized possession as a human. As a thought experiment, sometimes try entertaining an idea that is very opposite of the group you belong to or the conventional wisdom. See if there is any value in deliberately going against the grain. We are all permeable to the influence of the group. What makes us more permeable is our insecurities. The less we are certain about our self-worth as individuals, the more we are unconsciously drawn toward fitting in and blending ourselves into the group spirit, gaining the superficial approval of group members by displaying our conformity. We cover up our insecurities to ourselves and to others. Sounds like me when I joined the military. But this approval is fleeting. Our insecurities gone at us, and we must continually get people's attention to feel validated. Your goal must be to lower your permeability by raising your self-esteem. If you feel strong and confident about what makes you unique, your tastes, your values, your own experience, you can more easily resist the group effect. Furthermore, by relying upon your work and accomplishments to anchor your self-opinions, you won't be so tied to constantly seeking approval and attention. It is not that you become self-absorbed or cut off from the group. Outwardly, you do what you can to fit in, but inwardly, you subject the ideas and beliefs of the group to constant scrutiny, comparing them with your own, adapting parts or all of those that have merit and rejecting others that go against your experience. You are putting the focus on the ideas themselves, not on where they come from. Your second task is to become a consummate observer of the groups you belong to or interact with. Consider yourself an anthropologist studying the strange customs of an alien tribe. Look deeply at the culture of your group, how it feels from within, the feeling contrasted to other groups you have worked with or belong to. You are catching the social force as it molds the group into an organism, the sum greater than its parts. Most people intuitively sense the rules and codes of behavior in the group. You want to take this further by observing these rules in action and making your knowledge of them more conscious. Why do they exist? What do they say about the group? Gaining a deeper appreciation of the culture and codes will make it much easier to navigate the social space and maintain a degree of detachment. You will not try to change what cannot be changed. When it comes to the inevitable factions that emerge, it is better to keep yourself unaligned and let others fight over you. You do not need to belong to a faction to derive a narcissistic boost. What you want within the group is strategic options and room to maneuver, to have many allies and widen your power base. Your goal in this second task is to maintain as tight a grip on reality as possible. Groups tend to share beliefs and ways of looking at the world that are one-sided. They give greater weight to information that fits into their preconceived notions. They exaggerate qualities of rivals or enemies. They become over optimistic about their plans. Taken far enough, the group can hold beliefs that are quite delusionary, and its actions can border on madness. Observing the group with a degree of distance will help you be aware of the distorting effect on your perception that can come from being so embedded within a group. Your strategies and decisions will be all the more effective for this. Just as groups tend to exert a downward pull on our emotions and behavior, we can also experience or imagine the opposite, a group that exerts an upward pull. We shall call this idea the reality group. It consists of members who feel free to contribute their diverse opinions, whose minds are open, and whose focus is on getting work done and cooperating on a high level. By maintaining your individual spirit and your grip on reality, you will help create or enrich this idea team of people. For more on this, see the reality group on page 431. This ability to observe the group and detach ourselves is more critical now than ever for several reasons. In the past, people's sense of belonging to certain groups was more stable and secure. To be a Baptist or a Catholic or a communist as or a French citizen provided one with a strong sense of identity and pride. With the diminishing power of these large-scale belief systems, we have lost this inner security. And yet we retain the same profound human need to belong. So many of us are searching for groups to join, hungry for the approval of others who share our values. We are more permeable than ever. This makes us eager to become a member of the latest cult or political movement. It makes us highly susceptible to the influence of some unscrupulous populist leader who preys upon this need. Instead of forming large-scale groups, we now form tribes of diminishing size to get a greater narcissistic boost. We view larger groups with suspicion. Social media abets this dynamic by making it easier to spread the narrowly focused views and values of the tribe and making them viral. But these tribes don't last long. They are continually disappearing or regrouping or splitting apart. And so the ancient need to belong is never satisfied and drives us mad. Tribalism has its roots in the deepest and most primitive parts of our nature, but it is now coupled with much greater technological prowess, which makes it all the more dangerous. What allowed us thousands of years ago to bind our group tightly and survive could now easily lead to our extinction as a species. The tribe feels its very existence at stake by the presence of the enemy. There is little middle ground. Battles can be more intense and violent between tribes. The future of the human race will likely depend on our ability to transcend this tribalism and to see our fate as interconnected with everyone else. We are we are one species, all descendants of the same original humans, all brothers and sisters. Our differences are mostly an illusion. Imagining differences is part of the madness of groups. We must see ourselves as one large reality group and experience a deep sense of belonging to it. To solve the man-made problems threatening us will require cooperation on a much higher level and a practical spirit missing from the tribe. This does not mean the end of diverse cultures and the richness that comes with them. In fact, the reality group encourage inner diversity. We must come to the conclusion that the primary group we belong to is that of the human race. That is our inevitable future. Anything else is regressive and far too dangerous. Okay. In conclusion, pretty much what I got from this group dynamics is pretty much just pretty much knowing how to separate yourself from the group and not get too involved in it. Because if you do get too involved in the group, you'll get lost in the group. So that's pretty much what to sum up, to sum this all up. And another thing that I discovered is pretty much how it was. How I was reading about courtiers, how they have to know how to maneuver and to get certain positions. Well, I look at that as courtiers as getting pretty much getting a job, especially down here in San Francisco where there's a lot of tech jobs, and I feel like that's pretty much is the environment, because I've already been to Facebook headquarters. I've been to LinkedIn headquarters. Where else? I think those. And then I went to Salesforce headquarters. So those three places. And I noticed you had to be sharp on your courtier skills, and I was rusty. So I just went out there for networking, trying to see who's out there, pretty much market my face, get me back to socializing again, because I've pretty much been out of the social game for 10 years now. And 10 years of that, and then school, and it pretty much me getting back into this is wow, because I never was big on education. I was more the visual, just pretty much making money out in the world, cutting grass in the summer, shoveling snow in the winter, raking leaves in the fall. And then I live by a golf course. I used to collect golf balls and then sell it back to the golfers. I remember I even went into the ponds that they had where all the balls be in, and I would get the balls in there and then sell them. So it wasn't an experience, but I was that type. I never was like a reader and education. This is something new for me, so I'm practicing my education now. So this is pretty much me learning how to read, forcing myself to read daily. So, and I'm pretty much on page 424. This is the first time I've read a book with that many pages. Usually I'll skip around, but by me doing this, it's forcing me to strengthen my vocabulary, pretty much the muscle in my brain. Since I'm working out my body, at the gym, this is pretty much reading now is pretty much I'm doing exercising my brain. That's exercising my brain. Like the gym for my brain, pretty much reading is from what I'm pretty much teaching myself. Outro. Subscribe to the channel. Comment any questions you have. Like if the information was inspiring for you, and share this knowledge with other alchemists. Also, follow me on Instagram for more progressive knowledge. My Instagram is max_Bugatti_8008. I'm all about family first. I'm a global stock investor. I'm a filmmaker. I'm an aerospace botanist. Pretty much what that is I grow cannabis, OG Kush, and grape ape. Those are pretty much with the aerospace botanist. Pretty much I'm teaching myself how to plant. I got jalapenos, seeds that I'm gonna start planting. Pretty much I'm teaching myself to grow plants for space. So when we're able to colonize space, I'll be able to grow my own plants. And then I have another plant that I started growing. It's the mother-in-law's tongue. Pretty much it's what NASA uses to filter. They use it more out in outer space to give you fresh air, cleans the air. So I have that in here with me, cleaning the air. So that's all part of my aerospace botanist. I have a masculine confidence building program. You can that's pretty much this channel. And this channel covers pretty much health as well, nutrition, fitness, build your business, form an LLC, form a holding company, invest in the global stock market, land, real estate, precious metals, networking events, build a family, pass your legacy on to your kids, or you can die forgotten. The choice is yours. Growing marijuana, that's what the aerospace botanist is. U.S. military veterans only. Pretty much all the programs that I'm pretty much enrolled in. Uh, United States credit, credit in Colombia in South America. Show you how to get both of those. Pretty much now I'm in a debt relief program. Show you guys when you get overwhelmed with debt, you can enroll in a debt relief program. They'll negotiate with your bank. They'll cut your debt in half. You won't pay the interest, and then you'll just pay pretty much the debt relief program back, because on your behalf, because they cut it down. So once you pay that, they'll usually charge like their fee. I know with mine, freedom debt relief, they charge me 20% of the debt, so which is like 4,000, because I want to settle a 20,000 debt. That's just way over my head. And that's just something like a lot of people, when they get stressed out, they try to fight it, but you're not gonna fight that. That's compounding interest. Like pretty much how they use compounding interest with us with credit cards, I use that same formula with investing in stocks. So if you wanna invest in stocks, check me out on the Eighth Wonder of the World, Compounding Interest. That's my new channel. It was called Global Stock Investing, but I changed it to the Eighth Wonder of the World, which is Compound Interest. And then pretty much this is knowledge time. Read a book. So within knowledge time, I read a book. Then I also have I'm learning about AI, artificial intelligence, neural networks, machine learning, deep learning, and then big data. So, and then currently I'm out here in San Francisco until the 22nd of May. And then I'll be back in South America. While you're slaying dragons, I'll be taming them.